There's a common myth that black people don't like water. It's a stereotype deeply rooted in racism.
In fact, several native groups along the coast of Africa and in the Caribbean not only swim, they also surf. Today, we are squashing the stigma.
Surfing is Southern California. It's how we play, how we express our culture, our fashion. It's a way of life that is unique to us. But Southern Californians didn't invent the sport. Let me take you back, way back, to where surfing began.
So you have this tradition in Africa going back at least 800 years of people in Western Africa, from Senegal down to Angola, surfing, either laying down, kneeling down, or standing up.
West Africans using hollowed-out logs and other materials to surf the waves of their homeland, eventually spreading the sport of kings and queens to lands both distant and exotic. Professor Kevin Dawson of the University of Merced is a historian and a surfer.
We do have evidence of enslaved people taken first to the islands off of Africa, to Sao Tome, Principe, and the Cape Verde Islands.
It was the early 1900s when surfing hit the beaches of Santa Monica. In 1912, Willa and Charles Bruce bought a small piece of land in Manhattan Beach for $1,200. It would become known as Bruce's Beach. It was right on the Strand. Finally, a place for black families to enjoy the surf and sand in Southern California.
It was a place that was successful for almost 20 years.
Allison Rose Jeffries wrote the book on Southern California black history. She's chronicled the brutal injustice of the eventual demise of Bruce's Beach and black surfing.
And they were able, with some harassment by the Ku Klux Klan, to push African Americans out.
These were brutal times for local blacks, but the wave would eventually break. A black surfer named Nick Gabaldon would be the first to blend in with white surfers at the famous Point Break of Malibu's Surfrider Beach. Gabaldon shredded the world-class right. The white surfers were in awe.
Even though he was of black and Mexican descent, he was respected.
The surfing skills of Gabaldon, honed at Malibu, would make him a legend, but the racism and roadblocks he faced to get in the water there was an injustice.
Surfers at that time, in the 1950s, welcomed him, but he wasn't allowed to actually go into Malibu.
I think it's important for us to share this story in places like Compton, and just inspire generations of African Americans.
David Mesfin was born in Ethiopia and came to Southern California as a kid. His fascination with surfing led him to make a documentary called Wade in the Water.
That really put a lens around what it is to be a black surfer, and just making it easy, I think, for people of our community to go out in the water.
David's film is visually stunning, and it teaches us the rights and wrongs of a sport that can bring its rider as close to Mother Nature as is humanly possible. But mostly it reminds all surfers, white or black, that we are custodians and members of a very exclusive club.
As African Americans, we come from west coast of Africa, which is rich in aquatic culture. So it is part of your culture, and you have to embrace it.
As you've just learned, surfing is rich in history, and it'll only continue to get richer, making our ancestors proud of what they've given us. Reporting from Manhattan Beach, I'm Kai Goldberg, KTLA 5 News.
Some people call her Coach Jet. Others call her the fastest woman alive. But no matter what title you give her, Carmelita Jeter sprinted her way to greatness.
The now retired Olympic sprinter is sharing her knowledge and skills with young athletes here in her hometown of LA. It's a full circle moment she didn't even think was possible.
Jetting from Division II all the way to the record books.
Now pulling even is Jeter, and now Jeter passing her. Jeter wins it 10.87 seconds.
Sprinter Carmelita Jeter carried the title fastest woman alive for 12 years, including 4 years into her retirement.
It just showed my dedication. It showed my sacrifice and it showed my hard work. I definitely held myself to a high standard.
But the LA native didn't always have a clear path out the starting blocks.
She had a horrible start in the final and it really threw her off.
Dreaming of becoming a USC Trojan, Jeter instead became a Toro at Cal State Dominguez Hills, a Division II university.
How did Carmelita the Jeter end up at a D2 school?
I went to a preparatory Catholic school, but I just wasn't as focused as I should have been.
Yet Jeter became the winningest runner in Toro's history and was the first student athlete to qualify for the U.S. Olympic team trials. But she wasn't convinced track was in her future.
I just wasn't that good.
Really?
I just was not that good, and things just weren't falling in place for me. I didn't come out of the big school. I wasn't running the fast times.
Jeter applied and interviewed to work for the Los Angeles Police Department, but couldn't cross the finish line in blue.
One of the women said, "I can't hire you." And I said, "Well, why not?" And she says, "Because when you speak about track and field, you light up. And I think you should try it one more time." I cried because I was living check to check. That next day, I went to practice and I trained like a monster.
In November of 2008, Jeter would change her coach to the former sprinter, John Smith.
I got to John when I was ready. I was ready to listen, I was ready to learn, and I was ready to execute.
I looked at her and said, "You know you can run 10.6. She looked at me like, "What is he been smoking?" She just had all the qualities. Plus, I knew she wanted it.
But the road wasn't all clear from there. The 2009 Track and Field World Championships devastated her after finishing third in the 100-meter.
Here I am, the age that I am, and I'm still playing around. I was upset with myself. I cried in the back like a baby that you just took their pacifier out their mouth. And I said to my coach, "I'm gonna make it up."
Determined to turn turmoil into triumph, 1 month later, Jeter ran a 10.67 in the World Athletics Final in Greece to become the third fastest woman alive. And just a week later, she ran a 10.64 in the 2009 Shanghai Golden Grand Prix to solidify her title as fastest woman alive.
And I went into that race to beat everyone.
3 years later, in the 2012 Olympic Games, Jeter won a gold medal in the 4x100 alongside LA native and USC Trojan Allison Felix. Their winning time broke a record that stood for nearly 30 years. Now, Jeter is finally a Trojan as a men and a women's sprint coach.
It feels like a full circle moment. Why wouldn't I want to be back home? It makes coaching much more fun, much easier, and it makes me a happier coach.